September 11th, 2001. United States. The morning started like any other. Blue skies over New York, commuters flooding the streets, airplanes lifting off from airports along the East Coast. But beneath the calm, a deadly plan had been brewing for years. Al-Qaeda, a radical Islamist group led by Osama bin Laden, had targeted the United States for its presence in the Middle East, its support for Israel, and its global influence. Their goal was clear: strike fear into the heart of America. At 8:46 a.m., the first jet tore through the North Tower of the World Trade Center. Screams echoed through the streets as people tried to comprehend what they were seeing. Some thought it was an accident. 17 minutes later, a second plane slammed into the South Tower, leaving no doubt the nation was under attack. At the Pentagon, another jet carved through the building, igniting chaos and destruction. A fourth plane never reached its target, thanks to the courage of passengers who fought back, forcing it down into a Pennsylvania field. Inside the towers, workers scrambled down smoke-choked stairwells while firefighters climbed upward, determined to save lives. By 10 a.m., the skyline changed forever as the Twin Towers collapsed in clouds of ash and steel. Nearly 3,000 lives were lost, countless others injured. Streets were blanketed in dust, cars crushed under debris, and emergency crews searched desperately for survivors. The attacks reshaped America, security tightened, wars began overseas, and a wound opened in the national consciousness. Fear, grief, and unity intertwined as the world watched in horror. Ordinary mornings would never feel the same again. Oklahoma City bombing, 1995, United States. In the spring of 1995, anger and resentment toward the federal government had been quietly brewing in the heartland. Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols, enraged by federal actions at Waco and Ruby Ridge, decided to take a devastating stand. On April 19, 1995, a rented Ryder truck packed with nearly 5,000 pounds of explosives was parked outside the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City. At 9:02 a.m., the bomb detonated. The explosion ripped through the building, collapsing walls, shattering windows, and scattering debris across the streets. The scene was apocalyptic. People screamed, fled, and searched for loved ones amidst the chaos. Emergency responders rushed in, digging through rubble to pull survivors from the wreckage. By the end of the day, 168 lives had been lost, including 19 children in the building's daycare, and over 680 people were injured. The attack shocked the nation, exposing the threat of domestic terrorism and extremist ideology. McVeigh would later be executed, Nichols sentenced to life. But the tragedy left an indelible mark. Federal powers expanded to fight future threats, and Americans were reminded that terror does not always come from overseas. It can emerge from within. Bali bombings, 2002, Indonesia. Tourists laughed and sipped cocktails in the warm Balinese evening, unaware of the shadow looming over the island. Jamaah Islamiyah, a militant group with links to Al-Qaeda, had set its sights on Bali to strike at Western influence and assert their extremist vision. On October 12, 2002, 3 bombs detonated almost simultaneously in Kuta, a bustling tourist district. A suicide bomber exploded a backpack inside Paddy's pub, while a car bomb outside the Sari Club sent flames and shrapnel into the crowded street. A third bomb targeted the U.S. consulate, but caused only minor damage. Chaos erupted. Screams, panic, and confusion filled the night as tourists and locals scrambled for cover. By morning, 202 people were dead, including 88 Australians, and more than 200 were injured. The bombings devastated Bali's tourism industry, a cornerstone of the local economy, and prompted Indonesia to crack down on Jamaah Islamiyah. Governments across Southeast Asia and the West strengthened cooperation against terrorism. Bali would recover, but the memory of that night left scars that would not fade. Madrid train bombings. 2004, Spain. Morning commuters in Madrid carried briefcases, coffee, and the quiet rhythm of everyday life. But March 11th 2004 would shatter that rhythm. An Islamist extremist cell, inspired by al-Qaeda and angry at Spain's involvement in the Iraq War, had planned to strike during rush hour. At 7:37 a.m., explosions ripped through 4 commuter trains simultaneously. Trains crumpled under the force, carriages split open, and passengers were thrown into chaos. Smoke and dust filled the tunnels as survivors crawled over bodies, searching for friends and strangers alike. By the day's end, 191 lives were lost, and more than 2,000 were injured. The attack sent shockwaves through Spain. Days later, the ruling government lost the general election, influenced by public outrage. Domestic counterterrorism efforts intensified, and European nations collaborated more closely to monitor extremist activity. Madrid's trains would carry passengers again, but the memory of that morning lingered in every station. Mumbai Attacks, 2008, India. From November 26th to 29th, 2008, India's financial capital became a battlefield. Lashkar-e-Taiba, a Pakistan-based militant group, sought to destabilize the country and draw attention to the Kashmir conflict. Coordinated attacks unfolded across Mumbai. Luxury hotels, a bustling railway station, a cafe, and a Jewish community center were all targeted. Gunmen stormed the city with firearms, grenades, and explosives. Panic swept through the streets as innocent civilians were trapped in crossfire. Buildings became siege zones and fires engulfed luxury hotels. Over 3 days, 164 people were killed and more than 300 injured. The siege was broadcast live, showing the evolving nature of urban terrorism. India and neighboring countries increased intelligence sharing and security measures. The attacks left a city in mourning and a nation forever changed, a vivid reminder of vulnerability in a densely populated urban center. Beslan School Siege, 2004, Russia. The first day of school was meant to be ordinary. Children laughed, parents waved goodbye, and teachers prepared lessons. But on September 1st, 2004, at school number 1 in Beslan, North Ossetia, a nightmare unfolded. Armed Chechen separatists, led by Shamil Basayev, stormed the school, taking over 1,100 hostages, most of them children. Their goal was to demand independence for Chechnya and draw attention to the Russian government's actions in the region. For 3 harrowing days, parents, students, and staff were held captive under constant threat. Explosions rocked the building, gunfire echoed through hallways, and fear hung thick in the air. Outside, desperate families waited, pleading for the safe return of their children. On the 3rd day, Russian forces stormed the school. Explosions and chaos engulfed the building. By the end, 334 lives had been lost, including 186 children, and hundreds more were injured. The attack shocked the world. Criticism of the Russian government's handling was widespread, and policies toward the North Caucasus were tightened. The Beslan siege became a grim symbol of the vulnerability of civilians, particularly children, caught in the crossfire of political violence. London bombings, 2005, United Kingdom. Morning commuters navigated the London Underground on July 7, 2005, unaware of the tragedy awaiting them. 4 British-born terrorists, radicalized and inspired by al-Qaeda, had planned to bring terror to the heart of the city. At 8:50 a.m., explosions tore through 3 subway trains during rush hour, and shortly after, a double-decker bus in Tavistock Square was struck. Smoke, fire, and screams filled the streets as chaos erupted underground. Emergency responders rushed to save lives, but by the end of the day, 52 people were dead and over 700 injured. The attacks highlighted the threat of homegrown radicalization and sparked new security measures across the UK. Surveillance laws were expanded, and public awareness of terrorism reached new heights. Londoners, resilient in spirit, returned to their routines, but the memory of that day remained etched in every station and street. Paris Attacks, 2015, France. Evening had fallen over Paris on November 13th, 2015. Cafes were filled with laughter, concerts filled with music, and life seemed ordinary. But ISIS had other plans. Coordinated attacks erupted across the city, shootings at cafes and restaurants, suicide bombings near the Stade de France, and a mass shooting and hostage crisis at the Bataclan concert hall. Panic and chaos spread rapidly. Patrons ran for their lives, streets were filled with sirens, and emergency services scrambled to respond. By the morning, 130 people were dead and over 350 injured. France was shaken to its core. The attacks led to a state of emergency, increased security funding, and intensified military operations against ISIS in Syria and Iraq. For Parisians, the night of terror would never be forgotten, a stark reminder of how quickly normal life could be upended by violence. Munich Olympics Massacre, 1972, Germany. The Olympic Games are meant to be a celebration of unity and sportsmanship. But on September 5th, 1972, the Munich Games were shattered. Members of the Palestinian militant group Black September took Israeli athletes hostage in the Olympic Village, demanding attention for their cause. A tense standoff ensued. Attempts at rescue failed, resulting in a shootout and explosions that left 11 Israeli athletes and coaches dead, alongside one German police officer and 5 terrorists. The world watched in horror as the Olympic dream turned into a nightmare. The massacre led to the creation of elite counterterrorism units, such as Germany's GSG-9, and intensified the conflict between Israel and Palestinian militant groups. It became a dark moment in Olympic history, forever linking the pursuit of sport with the threat of political violence. Pan Am Flight 73. Hijacking 1986, Pakistan. September 5, 1986, started like any other day at Karachi Airport. Passengers boarded Pan Am Flight 73, bound for New York via Mumbai, unaware that terror was about to strike. 4 armed members of the Abu Nidal organization, a Palestinian militant group, hijacked the plane on the ground. Their objective was clear: target Western interests and instill fear. The cabin erupted into chaos. Guns fired, passengers screamed, and a desperate struggle for survival unfolded in every aisle. Some attempted to escape, others froze in shock. By the time the ordeal ended, 20 people were dead, including 2 Americans, and over 100 were injured. Amid the horror, flight purser Nirja Bhanat emerged as a hero, risking her life repeatedly to save passengers. She would later be honored posthumously for her extraordinary bravery. The incident exposed glaring weaknesses in airport security worldwide and forced nations to rethink the safety of commercial aviation. It was a chilling reminder of how quickly ordinary travel could turn into a fight for survival. Christchurch Mosque shootings, 2019, New Zealand. March 15th, 2019, began as a regular Friday for worshippers at the Al Noor Mosque in Christchurch. But tragedy struck when Brenton Tarrant, a far-right extremist fueled by white supremacist ideology, opened fire during Friday prayers. Seconds later, he attacked a second mosque, the Linwood Islamic Center. The chaos was immediate. People scrambled for exits, some hiding under pews, others attempting to flee into the streets. By the time it ended, 51 lives were lost, and over 50 more were injured. Communities were left traumatized, shocked by the violence targeted at a place of worship. The attack prompted New Zealand to enact some of the strictest gun control laws in the world, banning semi-automatic weapons and high-capacity magazines. It also sparked an international conversation on regulating online content after the shooter livestreamed the first attack, highlighting the dark intersection of extremism and social media. Boston Marathon Bombing, 2013, United States, April 15th, 2013, saw thousands of runners and spectators enjoying the Boston Marathon. But near the finish line, chaos erupted as two pressure cooker bombs detonated seconds apart. The attackers, Tamerlan and Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, had been radicalized online and motivated by extremist ideologies. The explosions sent people flying, shattering bones and lives. 3 were killed, including an 8-year-old boy, and more than 260 were injured. Streets were filled with debris, smoke, and panic. Emergency responders acted swiftly, and a citywide manhunt ensued, ultimately capturing the surviving brother after days of lockdown and investigation. The tragedy cemented the Boston strong spirit, a symbol of resilience and community unity in the face of terror. It also underscored the evolving threat of lone actor and homegrown terrorism in modern cities.